Recording. Okay, welcome everyone. Apologies for not having the lecture on Monday. I had visitors that came over on Sunday, and then I had to drop them off on Monday quite far. So apologies for that. Now we ended our last lecture on whistleblowing. Let us, I think we discussed something on whistleblowing, so let's us discuss it a little bit more before we get to theories, to understand what it is, because it's very much in the IT field, because the IT field really deals a lot with information, and that is an area that can be very easily abused. So we want to understand what whistleblowing is and where it comes in the ethical and in the business side of things. Okay, so first things first, we want to understand what whistleblowing is before we can understand what it means and how people can be protected, because it's an essential part of ethics and also specifically for ICT. So whistleblowing is when an employee decides to expose illegal or unethical or dangerous activities that may be done by other colleagues. Yeah. So it's one way of exposing wrongdoings and essentially effecting a positive change. Yeah. I remember someone, I think it was Emmanuel who asked about it. Apologies, my network is really unstable today. Hello?
Yes, Doctor.
We can now hear you.
Yes, Doctor.
Sorry about that. My network is really unstable today. Let's try again. If it fails, we may have to extend this to another day. But let's try again. So as we were saying, whistleblowing is one way of ensuring accountability and transparency. When you allow that, give your employees that ability to allow whistleblowing, to expose wrongdoing. And in many ways, it is quite helpful. I remember at one point, there was a time we had some colleagues at the university at Uganda Matters who were not exactly behaving in an ethical way. And I remember we encouraged students to come out and speak, and they did. So whistleblowing does really help to expose some characters, because certain things automatically ruin the reputation of an organization. So it is important that something like this is opened up and allows people to actually carry out whistleblowing. Now in Uganda, interestingly, we do have a 2010 Act which gives an opportunity to protect whistleblowers. Yeah. So whistleblowers can be internal or external. So internal are those who may report misconduct that is happening within an organization. External are those who they normally may come from law enforcement or regulatory bodies, or even sometimes from the news media. Yeah. So any of these people, any of these bodies can come out and whistleblow on something that may not be going right within an organization. I hope I'm audible. I have to keep checking if I'm okay.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay. So there are risks and challenges to whistleblowers. Yeah. There's I have a nephew who keeps saying that I'm not a snitch when you're asking him to report something. He loves saying that thing. But however, it's a necessity that is there. Now, because you are reporting something that is that shouldn't be happening, there is always an opportunity for retaliation, because you're basically reporting misconduct. And if there's misconduct, there's somebody benefiting. So there is that possibility of retaliation. We've talked about some whistleblowers, especially in the US, who have reported certain illegal activities done by the US government. So, of course, when you're going against something as big as a government, and sometimes even a big boss within an organization, there's actually a possibility of retaliation. So sometimes there's even a situation where legal action may be taken against the whistleblower. We've seen the situation in the US where someone is now labeled a traitor, yet in reality they are reporting something that shouldn't be happening. They are reporting conduct that shouldn't be happening. And sometimes retaliation may lead to reputation damage and even impact the career of someone. Like my nephew says, nobody likes a snitch. So what are the possibilities that if you did whistleblow on some organizations, that they may want you with them? Because no one is an angel. That is the truth of the matter. And there's also the emotional distress and isolation that may come as a result of it. So why the need then for whistleblowers? No, most of the time it's the respect for privacy and confidentiality. As IT professionals, specifically the profession we come through with, why whistleblowers are so important, because as ICT professionals, this is what we deal with: data, private information, which you may not want to be leaked out. So if it is being mishandled, a whistleblower is is a person who can bring something like this out. Now, as they are also doing this, there's also another challenge. There's the issue of loyalty, and then the issue of the public interest. Remember the gentleman we talked about from the US. Being a government, a civil worker, there's a certain amount of loyalty that is expected from you. But however, there was also the matter of privacy and confidentiality that came into play. So at which point do you balance out and say, at this point I need to be loyal, and at which point does this become a matter of public interest that it must be brought out? So the point is that you do not want to cause unnecessary harm to an organization or individuals that are involved, but it has to be a balancing act of justice. Yeah. So in some cases, whistleblowers may be should I say, a structure that is brought out. That before I go up, I become public. Have I told my supervisor, or have I talked to a specific individual who's doing something? And follow that hierarchy, that if it fails, then go public. So you don't want to cause undue harm to an organization or to an individual. I remember there was a story told in one of the classes in science and technology, to be specific, where there was somebody who told a case, who gave us a case where he said that there was an individual in the organization who had really mentored him and actually brought him into the organization. But along the way, he had noticed that this person was doing something wrong. And this individual was forced to come out and speak. Yeah, he felt bad about it, but at the same time, this individual was carrying out certain activities that were not right, or that were unethical. That's the other thing, consideration a whistleblower must think of. The other thing is facing the consequences of that decision to whistleblow. Because there will always be backlash. Whatever the case, there will always be backlash. And then there's also the situation where others may fear to come out and do something in front of you. So there are all those considerations to think about. So, what steps does one consider to carry out successful with the whistleblowing? The first is gathering evidence, and this evidence must be done together with company policies and procedures to understand what is the reporting structure, what are the company's policies regarding this thing, and so on and so forth. Then, after this stage, report the misconduct to the appropriate individual. So this one avoids you're making an attempt to avoid causing unnecessary harm. There may be a situation where they may say, quietly, let's call this individual and talk to them. Maybe they are not aware this is something that is not shouldn't be done, and so on and so forth. Now, if that situation fails, then consider seeking legal advice and protection, because if you intend to go public, you also intend to protect yourself. Whatever the case, your intention is to protect yourself. Then prepare for any potential consequences and retaliation. And this one is essentially on the emotional and psychological part. Some of these things can really be, they can take a toll on someone's emotional and mental well-being. So here are some cases where there were whistleblowing in computer science and software engineering. So the first one is Edward Snowden, who was part of the NSA surveillance program. And this one, I think this is the one I've been talking about. Then there was Susan Fowler and the harassment at Uber. Then there was Dan Kaminsky, who talked about the vulnerability of Internet's domain name system. So these are just some examples. And you can also, if you read about their cases, especially for Edward Snowden, it talks, the retail, I think even up to this day, he can't go back to the US, if I'm not mistaken. So the role of the IT profession in whistleblowing, ensuring that there's due diligence in ethical and legal considerations. As IT professionals, the first things we must consider is to remember our role in protection of data, private protected, and we must have a policy that clearly spells out what is considered as private data, what is considered as protected, and that which is public, and ensure that that is followed as an IT profession. Providing and promoting a culture of transparency and accountability. Encouraging and protecting whistleblowers. So whistleblowing, as much as it is something that we may not want to do or want to be associated with, it can, however, it can have a certain impact. First is a cultural shift, within the organization, especially if the organization promotes transparency and accountability. If an organization is pushing towards that, of saying this is how we do our things, that, for example, making your policies public, ensuring that there is also, especially for IT, if there is an audit going on, also the ICT department should be audited. Okay, that is one thing that helps to promote a culture of transparency and accountability. There's also the negative impact, so for example, retaliation. It can also reinforce existing toxic culture and discourage future reporting going on. Creating a culture where whistleblowers are respected and heard, so that they can improve morality and loyalty, as well as public trust in the organization. Whistleblowing and the open source community. Now, here, I would like to be careful about some of these things. Sometimes certain movements for political purposes are attached to things that we see that are politically correct. Take an example, why we need to be careful about this. Certain things now are trending. When you're seen to do them, you're seen to be a morally upright person. Take an example, issues to do with the environment, issues to do with racism, and so on and so forth. So there are times when certain communities are attached to others simply because it makes them look right. So for here, the open source community, I would like to be careful about it. Although in reality, the open source community is always seen as something community driven. It's open for everyone. There are other situations, however, where it can lead to different mindsets. So take an example. I don't know if you remember the Arab Spring. Does anyone remember the Arab Spring, when certain Arab countries which were under dictatorial governments began to internally agitate for change and democracy? Does anyone remember that?
Yeah, quite
Yeah.
recent.
Yeah, that is, I think, one thing that that associates the open source community together with democracy and so on and so forth. So I remember specifically before it began, there was a time I went for it was, I think, it was a seminar on the open source community, and it was here in Uganda. And I remember there were some individuals who came from Egypt, and I remember in the discussions we had, you could see a certain sense of, should I say, blacklisting Microsoft as a supporter of dictatorship governments. So I remember these were some of the sentiments that were passing around. And when the Arab Spring did break out, there were certain individuals that came for that seminar that were prominent. So the open source community is very much seen as being open and speaking out against corruption and so on and so forth. I would like to be careful about this. Sorry.
It's not letting me go back. So let me say go back.
Gertrude, kindly mute yourself.
Sorry about that. So anyways, the open source community is normally seen as being open and, coming out to speak up against corruption. But many times, I would like to be careful about it, just to say that many times Microsoft is labeled as supporting the corrupt and corrupt governments and so on and so forth. I wouldn't like us to take that mindset, but however, the open source community is always seen to be quite open and exposing of such kind of behavior. However, we also want to say that the two communities, the proprietary and open source, of course, have different ideologies. Open source is not necessarily expecting to make profit. It's looking at a community that comes together to develop safe and secure systems, whereas proprietary is, of course, there to make money. That is the primary objective. So we need to be careful about those labels that are given out. So we also have certain challenges that come up with AI ethics and whistleblowers. So AI, as much as it is something that is welcomed, we do not want to see it take over certain roles of human beings. I don't know if most of you have heard, I don't remember the country. It was in the news, but there was a country that installed a minister that was actually an AI instance. Now, in such a situation, the question is, does this AI behave like a human being? As much as we want to have this efficient and what we want to say, quote unquote, incorrupt systems, the issue is, the first thing is it ethical in itself that an AI machine an AI instance is taking over the work that should be essentially done by a human being. Yeah. Then there is also the fact that as human beings, there are things we do, there are things that we hold back simply because we are human. Yeah. I may see somebody do something and then I say, maybe let me take a consideration of maybe this person's situation at home is not good, or that maybe this person is unaware or uninformed about some of the things that should be done, that ought to be done. Yeah. So this is where AI, on one hand, may be seen as incorruptible, but on the other hand, is not human. Yeah. Then you have the issue of journalists and their role in amplifying whistleblowing. And this has been done. We've seen the newspapers who expose certain wrongdoings in certain communities. But at the same time, because they are human, they are also susceptible to corruption. I'll give you an example. I know certain cases, certain articles that have only been published simply because the journalist has been paid something. So the person is not publishing this thing because he or she is looking at an act which is unethical, but they have been paid to do so. So the journalists do have a role in amplifying whistleblowing, coming out and helping an individual expose a wrongdoing. But at the same time, because we're dealing with human beings, we cannot be sure about, we also have to be careful about the ability to be corrupted. Whistleblowing and cyber security. Yeah. So cybersecurity, of course, is one of the things that is essentially is talking about protection of systems which may hold information or certain things that need information or data that needs to be protected. So there are times you have a system, an organization may have a system that may be vulnerable. An organization may not have taken out time to ensure that they have secured their systems and protected what information needs to be protected. So there are situations where a whistleblower may come out and state, hey, excuse me, this system is not okay. It can easily be, it has flaws, or it can easily be breached or something like that. However, again, the same cautions that have been raised before. First of all, understand the hierarchy of reporting. Before you go public, first inform those who are responsible. And if those fail, move higher. And if it fails further, that's when you can choose to go public, choose the appropriate channel to reveal these breaches and vulnerabilities. Now, as we've seen, Uganda has its own Whistleblowing Protection Act. However, because we are dealing with ICT crosses borders, okay? I may set up a system which is going to be accessed in Kenya, maybe in Nigeria, maybe in UK, and so on and so forth. So we must also understand international laws that are there to protect whistleblowers. So we know that some countries, especially Western countries, may have robust whistleblowing laws and regulations in place, but others may offer little or no legal protection. Yeah. Then we have cultural differences and society attitudes. There are some places where these things are openly accepted, whistleblowing is encouraged, and there are some cultures which really focus on privacy and respect for hierarchy. Yeah. Whistleblowing and the corporate social responsibility. So this was one of the last topics we discussed about the social responsibility. So corporate social responsibility refers to the obligation an organization has towards the society, the community in which it operates. Yeah. So whistleblowing can be seen as a key element because you're looking to fit into a society. You're looking that you have a responsibility towards the community which you are operating in. So it may be seen as something that prioritizes accountability and transparency, specifically to the community in which they operate, and may help to improve reputation and build trust with customers and stakeholders. Whistleblowing and government accountability. So, of course, this one is a very, 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 very sensitive area. Government remains government. And where corruption is, retaliation and some certain nasty habits may come out even louder. But, however, it's always in the best interests of any institution, be it government or private, to open the doors to whistleblowing because it demonstrates that you care about the public interest, you care about public funds. Yeah. So, especially for governments, the need to increase transparency and trust, it would be best to support whistleblowing in general. Whistleblowing and academic research. So this is also another very, very important area. When we are doing research, what essentially are we doing? We are bringing forward new knowledge. And this new knowledge is being brought forward in what should be using the scientific method. But however, sometimes the glory of receiving those accolades for research may be greater than the need to be authentic and sincere with how we are carrying out research. I remember I read an article of a professor in the Netherlands who had his professorship actually stripped, not his PhD, but his professorship, because it was found out that he was falsifying data. And in the Western world, academia is so respected that if in one university you are found to have plagiarized any kind of academic research, then you become persona non grata to any university. Yeah, you will not be touched. This is quite different with us in Uganda. Okay, it's quite difficult, quite different. If a student has been found to have cheated, maybe during an exam or anything, at most you'll be given maybe a dead year. You'll be a year or two will be suspended, but you will not. Your reputation. This will not be. Your situation will not be circulated to others. Yeah. So it is also a key point to note that in certain societies where academia is highly respected, coming out and reporting someone, whistleblowing is actually part and parcel of academic integrity. Yeah. Whistleblowing and healthcare. So in healthcare, this is a key area because healthcare normally deals with the most private data, the health status of individuals. Okay. So the need for transparency is just as great as any other institution. But I'd like to say that I think it's even greater. It's even greater for the healthcare sector to have transparency and to allow for the structures to allow for whistleblowing. Whistleblowing and environmental protection. So the environmental protection is one of the trends that are coming up, or I wouldn't want to limit it to just being a trend, but it's one of the significant areas that all must be must consider. Now, when you have corporations, especially corporations that are, let's say, for example, in the production of goods and of goods basically, and there may be a concern about how they dispose of hazardous materials, or even how they take care of the environment in which they are. It's extremely important, especially now, to understand those amongst us that respect the environment and those that don't. Why? Because this is of direct interest to the community in which an organization exists. Yeah, the environment, the fact that you reach a rainy season and the amount of rains that you're receiving per season keeps reducing as the years go by. So it is important to understand the impact that each organization may have, or the responsibility they are taking in ensuring that they are taking care of the environment, or they are contributing to environmental protection. Whistleblowing and the military. Again, this is also one of the very complex areas because the military automatically goes hand in hand with secrecy and confidentiality. Yeah, because it relates to national security. But however, simply because it's just because it's of national security, it's also of greater significance to support transparency. Why? It's very easy for the military to abuse their power as the security operatives in a nation. So it is important that there is also room for whistleblowers. Whistleblowing and social justice. So this is a key area in point. You want to be able to know if there is discrimination going on in any particular area of a society or community. So whistleblowing is also one way of supporting or protecting social justice or injustice for that matter. So the future of whistleblowing. Now, one of the challenges we have, you may consider it a challenge, you may consider it an opportunity, is social media. Okay? Social media is one thing that will amplify whistleblowers, but at the same time, it may also be an area where retaliation and false whistleblowing may come through. Okay? It's very easy to paint someone as a devil over social media without understanding the story behind. So whistleblowing, yes, the social media can help, specifically in areas where maybe somebody feels they are too weak to speak out, they do not have a voice. Whistleblowing can provide that support. But however, there's also a chance that someone may falsely accuse another of what they may or may not have done. So do we have any questions so far on whistleblowing?
Not from me, madam.
Okay. Let's continue now with some of our theories, ethical theories that guide us in decision making. Let me just pull up the slides. Now, before we begin this lecture, I had requested you, I had put up a link on in Moodle. I don't know if you saw it, on some potential ICT ethical areas to consider. I don't know if you had time to read through.
No, doctor, we didn't get that notice. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Okay, please take time to read through, and then we shall have, the next time we meet, we shall have time for discussion. And by then, I think I'll also have put up your first assignment, but please read through because it's important. So let's look at ethical theories. Okay. Today we may have time for one ethical theory because I wouldn't want to take up too much time. Sometimes going beyond 2 hours is also not a good idea for online learning. But let's talk about ethical theories. So, first things first, we want to understand what are the common ethical theories. Like I said before, there are three. There are three essential ones that we know of. There may be others, but the core are three. We want to discuss these ethical theories and their criticisms. What are and then also understand the implications of these theories to society. So, first of all, we are talking about theory. We have talked about, I'm sure we know theories from research, from the different the different subjects or modules we've covered. Each may have theories that support certain way of thinking. So, but what's the role of a theory in general? So first things first, we understand that we have the world in which we live. Yeah, we have the world in which we live. And a theory essentially is there to help you understand this world. And then it's there to help you to understand how you can change it. So the world as we see it, since time immemorial, man has been trying to change the world to make it more comfortable, to make it more accommodating for all of us. So in understanding, theory helps to describe the current situation as it is. Now, specifically for ethics, theory helps us to understand how it ought to be, how the world ought to be. And therefore, theory then guides us on the action that needs to be taken in order to change the circumstances in which we are currently living. So we have three core theories. Last week we talked about the consequence-based, which is also utilitarianism. Yeah. Then we have deontology. Utilitarianism looks at consequences. What are the benefits? Do the benefits outweigh the costs if I carry out this act? Deontology is very law-like, where it requires us to conform to certain moral principles. So it's not about benefits, it's about conforming to certain moral principles. And we see some of this in homes. All of us come from a home, from families where there are certain rules that exist. Whether you like it or not, it will happen. That is deontology. Then you have virtue. So virtue is very much looking at the individual and the desire to improve their current status. Okay? So utilitarianism, we've seen utilitarianism in several things. We're going to have a discussion on that. But utilitarianism looks at the greatest happiness as the principle. What is it that will bring about the greatest happiness for the majority of the people? This deontology, like we said, is looking at conformity, categorical imperative. This is the law and this is what we follow. And then virtue is an individual coming out to improve their character. Even just you, and a perfect example would be each one of you who has made a decision to come and do a master's degree. It's demonstrating somebody who wants to improve their competence, yeah, at their workplace, professionally, and so on and so forth. Let's consider this diagram that we see, where you have a train trolley and the operator here. This individual has two options. There's one train track along which 5 people are tied. And if he takes that train track, 5 people will be most likely crushed to death. Then there's another track which has one person. One person along that train track. So the question will be, on which track should he direct this trolley, this train track, or this train? Which track should he take? Let's consider the utilitarian. Utilitarian will say, well, this track will mean 4 people will die, or 5 people will die, and the second track only 1 person. So you'd be bringing about a greater happiness with 5 people's lives being saved. Just get at least have 1 person die than all people to perish. Okay? That is how a utilitarian will look at it. What about a deontologist? The person would say, what is the law? What is the law? Thou shalt not kill. Stop the train. And then the virtue person would also look at like what would I want to, what would my character, what will people say that I had someone killed or something like that. So the different options each theory provides. Let's look at another situation where you have 2 onlookers who see 5 people tied up, and they have an option of running down to untie these people, or warning the trolley driver, or simply saying, this is none of my business. Let's move on. Yeah. So in each case, what ethics is basically telling us, we are all faced with an ethical dilemma at one point or the other. In our workplaces, we're all faced with an ethical dilemma, and the decision one must take when they're in this situation. Let's look at another case of a transplant surgeon. Yeah. Consider the case of a transplant surgeon. Somebody who is a surgeon who is treating a patient, and maybe considers the case that there may be a younger person who may need these organs and may encourage this other patient, or may choose not to treat the other patient. That is one. There are also situations, we do know there are cases happening internationally where there are people who are trafficked to other countries and parts of their bodies are removed and sold on the black market. And you have a transplant patient who knows, who may be fully aware that this organ has been gotten from a black market from the black market, maybe illegally or inhumanely got from an individual. But this transplant surgeon has a patient who needs to live. So what should that surgeon do? Yeah, what should that surgeon do? Let me pose this to the class and see, what do you think about such a situation?
Doctor, I beg your pardon on your question.
I was giving an example of transplant surgeons or a transplant surgeon. So we all know what a transplant surgeon is. Yes,
we do.
do we?
Yes, we do.
Yes. So
Yes, we do.
now the field of organ transplant comes with a lot of controversy. So you have, let's say, situations where you have a hospital, a doctor has a patient or patients who probably need maybe things like a liver transplant, heart transplant. Some are children, some are, they're different people from different walks of life. Now, because of the rare cases, because this is a rare case of, let's say if you have a heart transplant and someone is in need of a heart transplant, the mere fact that you need a heart transplant means that somebody else has to die for this patient to get a heart, and a heart which actually matches this particular individual. Now, at the same time, because these things are rare, there also has been a rise. There are also situations where people do get some of these organs from others illegally or inhumanely. So take an example. There are people, even I think even here in Uganda, where somebody will be told that, oh, we're taking you for work, maybe in Saudi Arabia or India or something like that. But in reality, this person is going to be taken and parts of their body may be harvested. Some people may be killed, others may be sent back in really horrible health conditions, and so on and so forth, where someone did not voluntarily give their body parts, their body organs, to be donated to those in need. Now, imagine a case of a surgeon who has a patient or patients who are in need of these organs, but has been availed organs that have been retrieved from maybe people who have been trafficked, and body organs have been retrieved illegally. But the doctor has patients who are in need. What should that doctor do? How would you guide such a situation if it were you?
That's an interesting dilemma, though.
Hmm.
Yeah. In this scenario, if I were the doctor, I'd go with the theory of hear no evil, see no evil.
Where you, because sorry, how does that translate? I simply go ahead and transplant.
Or transplant because I think, yeah, number one, there's a person right in front of you who has a chance of living.
Mm-hmm.
It's also that the organ they've brought for you cannot be taken back to where it was got.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yes, it cannot be taken back to where it was got. That one has been done already. That person has been, unfortunately, the life has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
But you have another chance here of saving this person.
A life. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Andrew. There was somebody else who had raised their hand, Eric.
Yes, doctor. Me, I was thinking if okay, faced with such a situation, because we know that the transplanter surgeons, they have their code of conduct. Yeah, like most professionals, let's say the soldiers, even these, they have their code of conduct. But also as an individual, each one has their values, which they have to follow. So now it's upon the surgeon to know which one precedes the other. Yeah. But since a life was already lost, you have the organs. So you can't reverse the other, but you can go with something. You can save someone's life. So I'll go with saving the life which is at hand, because you had no control of the other parts which they brought of the person who was already killed.
Okay.
So we have to just go with the one which is at hand. Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you have a contribution?
Thank you so much, Doctor. Well, I also had the same thing that Eric stressed about, because basing on moral conducts, yeah, you can't, but it also depends on the lives that you're saving, because if that is the lever that you're going to use to save the other person's life, then I wouldn't deny, if I'm a surgeon, to use it, because I'm also saving a life, because that is what is there at that time. Because maybe if this person says, because we have cases where people donate these organs, where someone says that I'm donating it, then maybe if it's that aspect, then, but the scenario depends on which scenario is it? Is this person donating the organ, or was this person just killed? And then, because in most cases, it's very hard for a surgeon to look into the whereabouts of the organ that was brought in. And his main concern is saving life. So, yeah, so I think I wouldn't look into where this organ came from. I would just look at saving the life.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Doctor,
Yes,
doctor,
Eric.
maybe maybe to say something. You see, here the surgeon is not thinking about that, but an instance, for example, if let's say the surgeon, the nephew gets lost maybe for a month, then he gets to hear that the nephew was killed, and there they tell him that this organ is for your nephew. Do you think to be the same with that idea of, since my nephew is dead, let me also just save a life? I
Yes,
think
yes.
that becomes a bit complicated.
Yes, it's a very complicated scenario, even if it wasn't just his nephew. But imagine that take an example, there was a time when I think internationally people say governments, especially Western governments, say they were no longer going to deal with precious minerals that were coming from conflict areas. So, case in point, there are countries like Congo, where I think Congo, Liberia, such countries, where the war is being fueled by the rebels are using these minerals to purchase guns to continue oppressing or killing and so on and so forth. So internationally, countries said, no, especially the Western countries said, we're no longer going to purchase what they refer to as blood diamonds. Now that was something that was universally accepted. Now you have a situation where in a black market you have people who are being trafficked, especially people from poor countries, and their organs are being harvested and sold. So there is a part where if you insist on using these organs, you're actually encouraging an inhumane act. That's one. You're encouraging an inhumane act. But then also there's the side which most of you have said you're saving a life. So you realize ethics becomes a very complicated matter. Emmanuel, you have something to say?
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. I think that is where my point was coming from, because at the receiving side, as a transplant surgeon, you are not interested in knowing where these parts are coming from. You are just receiving and saving a life. But you are very sure these parts are not manufactured in any company. So you are
Yes.
very sure they are being got from some individual somewhere to bring to you. Okay? And now I'm thinking, I'm looking at a situation where you are supporting that trade as much as you don't know where they are getting them, but the mere fact that you are accepting them and using them, so you're supporting the trade in a way. So at this point, it's very hard to know where you stand in such a situation, but like we are discussing, it's an ethical dilemma. You are in between saving a life using a part that you are very sure has been obtained as a result of losing a life somewhere. So it's a complicated situation.
It's I think now this discussion shows us how ethics is quite complicated, and there
Yeah.
isn't a one size fits all. So yeah, thank you everyone. Daniel, you have a contribution?
Thank you, Doctor. How about in the perspective of make an assumption that wherever everything came from is legit? So me at the table, I'm supposed to make that successful transplant. How do you handle that?
Making sure that what has come to you. Are you saying that the individual that the surgeon should know where this organ has come from?
Maybe on an assumption that he doesn't know. Maybe
He
was called
doesn't
in.
know.
We have
Yeah. But
yes.
it's essentially they should know, because number one, because it's such it is such a, how should I put it? It is such a, this is not the same thing as saying I'm going to the market to buy beans. Yeah, I think Emmanuel has something to add. I don't know how to phrase it well. Yes,
Yes,
Emmanuel.
Doctor, I just wanted to respond to Amos that assuming that whatever they have come from is legit is not proper. Because if it's legit, if it's a donation issue where someone is donating a party to you, I think there are documents that are followed.
Exactly.
And as a surgeon, you're meant, if you're looking at legitimacy, then you're meant to follow up with the documentation that there is a donation that has taken place from somewhere. But if you are just receiving them, then you're in a dilemma, like we are saying.
Yeah. It's quite complicated. David, you have a comment?
No, actually, I just have one because I've just found this theory so interesting. Yeah? Because basically, you're looking at two scenarios in this theory, and these dilemmas are basically the first example you gave us. Because you are looking at two dilemmas, and the first dilemma is you're looking at a circumstance whereby you have to save a life. Best thing, you don't want to know where that that item is coming from. And then the other dilemma is that you're looking at the legal perspective, the ethical standards, and the rules that govern you as a person. So basically, when you are able, when you're using the first perspective, you are like, I'm just saving a life. And then in this one, you're looking at the legal basic that basically, do I have to do a follow-up to find out where do these livers come from? Like how the other colleague told us that, you you might be a catalyst into this particular problem, is that you may not find out, but at the end of the day, you are a catalyst that is completing the entire process. Because at the end of the day, whether it's illegal, legally done, and for you are using them, that means you're fulfilling what is being done? So basically, that is the dilemma I was looking at. And I'm seeing really this theory is quite amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And when you think about it as human beings, when we have a sick person, the only thing you're thinking about is save the life, this person get better, this person get better. It's a bit difficult to accept the idea of death. Yeah. That death is part and parcel, and no matter what age, even if it's a child, death does occur. So it's a very complicated thing, quite complicated. So let us talk about consequentialism and deontology. Let's talk about essentially this. Let's talk about consequentialism. I think that's one we have time to talk about in depth. Yeah. Consequentialism looks at the rightness depends on the consequences. Yeah. What is the end result? Now, we talked about the case of the surgeon. Then deontology looks at the rightness depends on at least part or on a formal moral rule or principle. Yeah. So you realize most of our discussions were actually falling in between these two theories. Now, the problem is relativism. What I feel is right. What I feel is wrong. We're depending on feelings. And feelings are a very, very deceptive guide on what should be done. Yeah? Someone may feel right about killing you. So there's people who get a high from killing others. Yeah? So it creates a subjectivism on ethical matters. Now, as we were discussing the subject of the surgeons, I raised one thing, that when our relatives are sick, when our loved ones are sick, the only thing you have in mind is for this person to get better. Yeah, that's the only thing you have in mind. This person should get better. And you see family members pouring in money, selling whatever it is, just to make sure this person gets better. You may even do so at the expense of another person. Yeah. Now, the challenge with feelings is that we may, in the end, cause harm to others simply because I feel my person should get better. So these are some of the problems with specifically consequentialism. So with relativism, we have cultural relativism, where certain things are seen as morally right in a certain community, and in others they are seen as morally wrong. So I think I talked about that. We have, let's say, in some countries where women are seen as second-class citizens, for example, and someone may be deemed as having done something wrong because culturally that is what is seen as normal. There was a situation I remember in Pakistan. I think to this day that law is there, the law of blasphemy, where most of the time the culprits are Christian members in a community. Where I remember there was a case of a woman who was accused by fellow women that she spoke ill of the Prophet Muhammad, and she was sentenced to death. And I think it took the intervention of several international community members who came in to fight for this woman's life. But something like that cultural relativism happened. So someone may be declared guilty simply because it's culturally deemed as right. Yeah. And often there is no criteria distinguishing between the reformers and the criminals. Also, you can't explain moral progress. Yeah. So several things like this. Then you look at deontology on the other hand, where following the law is not the same as actually being moral. And here I want to quote a lawyer who one time said, you see, when it comes to law, there is the truth, and then there is the law. Okay? So many times when we have a law like moral principle, sometimes it may even propagate an immoral act. So laws cannot be immoral. Laws can provide insufficient direction, and laws can be ambiguous. So you are morally obligated to do, not to doing bad. Then there's also going beyond just the law, where someone does something simply because of its goodness. Then we have ethical egoism. Everything ought to do what is in his. Everyone should do what is his or her own rational self-interest. That goes back to relativism. What is right for me is what I'm going to do, or what is in it for me. So this justifies any self-interest, and no matter what or how this affects the other. And it's grounded on selfishness, basically. It's basically grounded on selfishness. So now, let us go through these theories in detail. I want to go through utilitarianism, and then we first stop that subject there. I put up a discussion for us on Moodle. So first is utilitarianism, or consequentially, the consequential theory. What is utilitarianism? It was started by Jeremy Bentham between 1748 to 1831. So this one looks at the greatest happiness or the greatest good. It can actually be measured. So you think of an agent A at a certain time T that needs to carry out an act. But what will make it morally right is what is the maximum amount of happiness. If I have several possible actions in front of me, what is it that will bring about the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people? Or what are the biggest consequence, the best consequences that could come out of it? So you remember when we looked at the subject of the surgeon and thinking about saving this life now, the other life is already gone, saving this life now seems like the greatest thing to do. But when you think about the fact that you are propagating, you are supporting something that is intrinsically evil, does that still make the act of saving the other person right? But, however, this is what utilitarianism presents. So utilitarianism looks at, there is what we call the hedonistic utilitarianism, the greatest feeling of pleasure, the greatest pleasure or the greatest amount of happiness. So it starts with the question is, what is good? So good is measured in terms of pleasure and the absence of pain. Yeah? Good is seen as the pleasure and the absence of pain. That is what is measured as good. So pleasure may be any sensation one would rather have rather than having no sensation, or pain. Yeah? Rather having no sensation. There are people who say, there are actually people who actually prefer to cause themselves pain because they are actually not feeling anything at all. It's a mental instability, so to speak. So there are people who would rather make themselves feel pain because they're actually not feeling anything at all. Yeah. So it's a very weird situation here. So in other words, utilitarianism has a scale, against which pleasure or pain or no pain is measured. Now, these scales, most of us have seen them. When have you encountered surveys where there's a questionnaire which has a scale and you're expected to give your opinion of the goodness or the badness of something, or the effectiveness or the non-effectiveness of something. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, we have
So,
one at office.
yeah, so that one is essentially based on the utilitarian theory. Yeah. Especially even for ICT, when we're trying to measure if an IT product is going to be taken up by users, we usually measure on the amount of satisfaction a user has towards a particular artifact or technology. So what are Bentham's advantages? What advantages does he propose over why this theory is good? So it says it treats everyone in the same way, neutral. Especially like when we're measuring the satisfaction people have towards a particular technology, that is really neutralistic in nature. It's also considered realistic because it is based on real psychology. What is somebody what are the majority satisfied about? Then it is non-metaphysical. It doesn't make goodness/badness, wrongness some sort of weird quality. What is considered good by many is considered natural to accept this as good. It's non-elitist because it doesn't separate. Pleasure is the same for all. These are the arguments. In principle, you can use the hedonic calculus to get an actual answer of what should I do in this case. So for each action, you determine an intensity. You determine intensity of pleasure times duration. The intensity of the pleasure and how long will I be expected to enjoy this. Then you determine probability. How many people in a certain group of people will fall towards this, will lean towards this this pleasure. So in total, you calculate the intensity times the duration times probability. So many times when you're looking at quantitative research, it's actually leaning towards utilitarianism because it's looking at how many people are leaning towards this kind of thinking as opposed to the other. Now, there's a question. What counts as pleasure? What counts as pleasure? I've given you an example that there are some people who would rather they'd rather cause themselves pain than not feel anything at all. Those are people who sometimes are seen as those who are causing them, they are self-harming. There are those who cut themselves or things like that. They are self-harming in order to feel something. So that becomes, in a sense, pleasure. Yeah. There's also sadistic pleasure. There are those who feel good when you are in pain. Yeah. That situation does happen when you are in pain. There are those who find pleasure in that. So then there's also the other question of what is the source, what the source of pleasure doesn't matter. This is what Bentham is saying. So it is almost like the surgeon, the case of the surgeon, who is, may say, I don't care where the liver comes from, as long as there's a liver here to put in this person. So there are higher and lower pleasures. Are there higher and lower pleasures? Then Bentham says this is a subjective criterion. So there are people who consider something or higher pleasure and others lower. Then, but J.S. Mill says there's an objective quality to different pleasures, and that should also be a factor in our calculations. Quality comes from what people would choose if they had access to all possible pleasures. So here is an example. Someone may say, I'll take an example for me. I love I have a sweet tooth. I love desserts. I love sweet things. I have another friend who is not particularly aligned to that. That's normal. But then there are those who may want to eat something that should not be consumed. Yeah. There's again a situation, a case, a live case that did happen. I don't know if I told this story in this class. Sometimes I forget. There was a case where in Germany, where there was a man who desired to eat a human being. And that basically he was a cannibal. And he went ahead and posted on the internet his desire and said, if there anyone who would like to volunteer for me to eat them. And indeed, as strange as the world is, an individual came out, and these two met up. And this one, before he killed him completely, first heavily dosed him and cooked certain parts of him, and they ate together. And then eventually he killed him completely, of course, ended this person's life, and began to consume this individual. Now, of course, all of this was, this man posted it on the internet and so on and so forth, and police got involved, of course, when it came out. When the police did view it, I actually spoke to a German citizen who said that the police officers who viewed those videos actually had to undergo psychological, some kind of therapy, because of course it was very, very disturbing. But in the end, these people couldn't even do, the authorities couldn't do anything about it because there was actually no law against it. But I think it would be universally acceptable to say this was something that was unacceptable, so to speak. It's unacceptable. But if you're taking the utilitarian perspective, what these two did was not wrong because they volunteered. Okay? But then on the other hand, there's the question of what was their mental status? Is this something that should have been accepted? And this is where utilitarianism falls short. In certain cases, there are things that are universally seen as good and morally right and just. Whether somebody wishes to do it or not, it should be unacceptable. Do we have any question so far on utilitarianism?
And, and I just have one thing that has amused me about utilitarianism, that they have a scenario that should a car kill the passenger and save 5 people, and utilitarianism say that yes, it should kill the passenger to save 5 people, which is kind of funny because you're the one driving, and you also need life.
So you see that utilitarianism in certain cases it's not applicable because there are certain universal laws, like the right to life. You want to ensure all life is treated with dignity and respect, that kind of situation. So utilitarianism, you see in one sense, it's very good. Take an example. If we are trying to measure the goodness of a particular product, utilitarianism is very good because it's seeing where this product gives satisfaction to the majority, where you say, yeah, that's very good. But in other cases, no, there are certain things that you cannot measure based on pleasure, but on its essential goodness in itself, where deontology then comes in. So I'm hoping that this first discussion opens up your mind about ethical theories and what we had discussed earlier about that not one size doesn't fit all, and what ethics essentially does for us. So I'm requesting if we can.
Yes, it does.
Yes, please. I'm requesting
does.
that we stop there for now and first take a break, and we come back to this the next time we meet. Is that okay?
It's okay. Thank you so much.
That's
It's
okay,
okay,
Doctor.
Doctor.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay, so I'm going to put up a forum discussion on Moodle. Hopefully tomorrow. I'm hoping I'll do it by tomorrow morning. But I have 2 lectures tomorrow. But I hope I'll do it tomorrow morning for that discussion. Yeah, basically
Okay.
on what we've
Okay,
discussed.
madam.
Okay. So
Okay,
my
sir.
question is, our classes, are they Monday, Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
Doctor. It's
madam.
Monday, Wednesday.
Okay, fine. Then that is okay. So let's meet
Yeah.
on Monday.
Okay.
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 Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Good evening to
Thank
you.
you.
Good evening to you too.
Good evening, David.